The GEA inter-county season is over, which means our attention turns to the PwC All-Star Awards. You can pick your own team on the brilliant PwC All-Stars app. Today, we're going to try and pick the football team of the year with some very special guests. We've got Kildare's Johnny Doyle, Kerry's Marc and the Roscommon manager, Anthony Cunningham. Lads, thanks a million for joining us. The PwC All-Stars Awards are on the 1st of November, Friday night. It's an incredible thing. I always find the All-Stars is a very funny one for GEA, Marc, because it's such a team game and humility is prized so much and nobody ever wants to kind of make it about them over the team. But this is the one night where it happens. And I don't know, now that you're kind of not playing anymore, do you find that you value those kind of getting those accolades and being on the team of the year 3 times as you were more than you did perhaps at the time?
Yeah, I suppose going back, they started in the 70s and lucky enough watching my uncle win All-Stars and win All-Irelands, and it was the thing we wanted to do. Obviously, win an All-Ireland medal first, but then obviously win the All-Star. And if any player says it's not about winning stuff, they're lying, because it's a lovely thing to win an All-Star. And you'd even see it the night of the All-Stars. You'd see the players that get the All-Stars; they're absolutely beaming, and it's if you get to a final and if you lose, it's little consolation, but it's still a nice thing to have, and it's something that you'll have forever, and it's something that you can look back on and have good memories. So they're always good nights, but it's what I find with them as well. They're nights for the winners, So yeah. This year Dublin, they won the All-Ireland. It's a win-win for them because they're going to have 6 or 7 All-Stars in the team, and it's really a night for the champions.
Johnny, when you won in 2010, it's a funny one for you because that year Kildare absolutely had a chance to win the All-Ireland, and you're probably in the same boat as Marc there, thinking about what might have been. But at the same time, when it's not Kerry and there isn't 5 All-Stars a year forever, for a county like Kildare, it does mean that more for the county and for your club and everything like that, to win an All-Star.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. I remember Kildare had 2 All-Stars, actually myself and Peter Kelly. I remember late in the night when we had a few beers too many, 2 of us were into the corner and the game had bolted, and a few of us were talking about, next year we'll be here, and you were sort of delighted in one half, but you were sort of reminiscing, and you were looking at the down boys and the Cork lads had won the All-Ireland, and you're thinking, we're not too far away from this. And so it was a little bit different than maybe what Marc would have experienced, in the fact that they'd won, had been there after being beaten in a final. To me, it was a different experience. And I remember the first time I was nominated was 2007, and I never forget that we were on holidays in Portugal. I remember the phones that beeped, there was loads of texts coming in, and I was just imagining, because I grew up, I suppose, when the Bank of Ireland sponsored, and the father come home with the poster, and you'd be looking at all the teams, and and I had them all up in the room as a young lad, and all of a sudden the first thing that came into my head, imagine I could be on this picture. So it was a different experience. But the big thing for me, the real, you talked about, whether it's a team game and all that stuff, and it is absolutely, and you probably do value a little bit more when you finish. But for me, they asked me to bring it down to the club one night. It was the first All-Star, the only All-Star we had in the club. And I remember in 2000, Ken Doyle, was a cousin of mine, got nominated. We were sure he was going to, Kildare won a Leinster, we were sure he was going to get it. And he was, pipped at the post. It was fierce disappointment. And going to the club, and the club was jammed to it was a celebration of all the good work that was going on in the club. It was just, I happened to be the one bringing it back, but that gave me huge pride. It was a big night, and people getting pictures taken with it, and it was a massive thing for, we'd be a small enough club. It was a massive thing for the club. So that was the standout thing for me.
Yeah. You mentioned the posters there, and a very funny story about, and it was like, you'd see the posters, they were up in my grandmother's house. The place was a shrine to my Uncle Paddy, and she used to have all the posters of Paddy when he got his All-Stars. But what they used to do, when you get your All-Star, the following morning the photographers would be there in the hotel the morning after the All-Stars. So you take your picture, you put on your jersey. So 2004, Paul Galvin, he was the 1000th All-Star. And he came down. Now he had a good night the night before, so the poster came out. Anyway, he looked as if he'd done 10 rounds with Mike Tyson, and so he got an awful hammering in the dressing room after as a result. But I remember my brother Dara, then in 2006, he got an All-Star, and there was a photographer. When we were going in, getting the All-Stars, he said, listen, you take my photograph tonight because I'm not taking one tomorrow morning.
Yeah, you can actually see a lot of those photos on the PwC All-Stars app. It's well worth going back through the archives. You see some of those next morning photos that you're talking about. There are a few of them there. I think you might have had one or two.
Maybe, Paul's one in 2004. Definitely check that one out.
But it's more than Paul.
We'll check yours as well.
We'll talk about 2019 and get to the team in a second, Anthony, but two nominations for Roscommon in Conor Cox and Niall Daly, which is a fair reflection, or maybe it's not a fair reflection, but I suppose it illustrates a very good year for you guys, winning Connacht, beating Galway and Mayo away from home, getting that win, the Super 8's not been really that far off if you take the Tyrone game as the first game of that series, There's a lot to work on for you guys going forward. It's a brilliant year.
Yeah, a huge amount to work on for next year. That's the challenge, really. Second year is always going to be difficult for a management team in there, but we'll be looking to build for sure. 4 points that day against Tyrone when we were very close. A couple of missed chances, missed frees. So there are small margins, a bit like maybe Kerry in the All-Ireland final replay. There was a few wides there as well on that day. And it's hard to train for that with a young team or a new team, but you have to become battle hardened and take your chances when you get them. But that's an area that we'd like to improve on. Yeah. But very satisfying to win in Mayo, first time in 33 years, and I think the supporters really, they couldn't believe it that night. And to win in Galway, 2 away matches, and they don't come bigger than Mayo and Galway in the kind of championship.
Yeah.
So.
Starting with the goalkeepers then, the nominations, Marc, are Stephen Cluxton, Sean Patton and Shane Ryan. I think Shane Ryan, a brilliant kind of first year in goal for Kerry, and I suppose what I was going to say about this is we were talking earlier on in the year about the performances of Sean Patton and Niall Morgan, who wasn't kind of counted as one of these, and Cluxton, and talking about how we're in a different era for goalkeepers and we've never had it as good. Shane Ryan has put himself in that conversation, but I didn't expect 2 or 3 months ago to have this as an open and showcase that Stephen Cluxton, probably one of his best ever years.
Oh yeah, and the 3 keepers that are there, just take Patton first. He was a revelation for Donegal this year. His kickouts, the way he was pinging them at Murphy, he was outstanding, and he really added to Donegal's game. Even against Kerry, I watched him closely that day. He has it. He can kick it left side, right side, and he can put it right into your chest as you're running into the play. With Shane Ryan, if you asked me at the start of the year an area where Kerry needed to work on, well, one of the areas they needed to work on was their goalkeeper. Shane Ryan has come in. What I was really impressed with this year was the way when Dublin went at Kerry in the last 10 minutes of the drawn match, he kept his cool. He was still going for his sharp kickouts when he was under serious pressure. Dublin were putting on a huge high press, and he's a big lad. He plays out the field with his club. He was brought in with Damon Fitzmaurice 2 years ago as an outfield player. He sees himself as a footballer, and he's finally, Peter Keane has told him, look, you're going in goal, and he's had a great year. And as you said, but for Cluxton having an amazing year, you'd be saying Shane Ryan for an All-Star, but Cluxton, look, different class, to be honest, and what he has done at the age where he's at. Every player in that Dublin team looks up to him. He's a real leader. Even when he's under pressure, if he makes a mistake, if a ball goes out, if an opposition team gets it, he just gets back, he gets into his groove. What an impressive footballer, and there's no doubt, but he has to get the goalkeeper.
Any objections?
Yeah, I suppose his saves on the first day, the drawn match, that they kept Kerry in it, or they kept Dublin in it, for sure. And I suppose we all know how good he is at the kickouts. I thought his kickouts this year were probably better than ever. He was under tremendous pressure on the press by Kerry on the first day, and he still held his nerve. And he's the guy who's brought the kickouts and that system of play to the level that everyone can benefit from. I've been Sean Patton, and he's probably can kick it longer, but Donegal played a system of opening up behind him or to the wings either side of Murphy, and he was extremely brilliant on his long kickouts and accurate. Probably was a bit may have been in Donegal's match that they lost against Mayo. Probably might have said he could have got a save on one or two of the Mayo goals. that evening in Castlebar. You know, but
Going back to Stephen Cluxton and look at, you know, we could talk all day about how good he is, and he's changed goalkeeping as we know it forevermore. But the big thing for me was, you know, his kickouts are second to none. But you know, there was a lot of really good saves, particularly in both All-Ireland finals. And I think that's maybe a credit to Kerry in lots of ways, the way they went about their business. A lot of teams that go up against Dublin and they go defensive and they don't put enough pressure on the Dublin defence. Where Kerry got through, you know, there was O'Shea had a great chance, Paul Murphy, super chance, and then Stephen O'Brien, you know, and they were big saves, you know, for a keeper in key matches. So to me, while the others did really well, there's only one winner.
We're agreed on Cluxton. I think it was worth talking about. We'll probably talk about it more when we get to the Footballer of the Year in a while. But on to the 18 defenders, we can only pick 6. We can pick 6 defenders as we can with the forwards in a while in any position. But of the backs, probably looking at a full back line, you know, at least in theory anyway, Marc. There's a couple I think that are just nailed on here probably throughout the team, but who would you be looking at as a full back man?
As a full back line, well, do you know the way, you're right, the way the All-Stars, the way they have them this year, you can just have any 6 backs. But the way I see it, it's kind of panning out that the players were kind of playing in the positions. Well, the team that I would see as an All-Star team, I thought that Mick Fitzsimons, when he went in on Clifford, he brought a kind of a bit of calm to the Dublin defence, particularly when there was a shaky period in the first half with Johnny Cooper. Kerry were targeting Clifford and Mick went in. Now Clifford was quite the first hit, but he was still effective. But Mick Fitzsimons quietened him. He went on him in the replay. Now, you know, I think all year, I think down through the years, when Dublin need a go-to man, Mick Fitzsimons is the man. You know, I've seen him defend. He always has the near hand for the tackle. He's good at getting the block. Plus, he's a big man. You know, and the thing about Clifford is a big man as well. Clifford is 6'3". So if you were looking for a fella to go on him, all of a sudden you've Mick Fitzsimons, who's probably 6'1", you know, 6'2". He's a big man, and he was well equipped to go in there. So I just thought he brought a bit of calm to the Dublin defence, particularly when they were down to 14 men, and. I think certainly he was definitely a standout player this year for Dublin and definitely deserves to be in the full back line.
Yeah, and it's funny, you know, we'll talk about him, particularly in the replay. I thought he was really top of his game, and yet he was Marc and Clifford, who had a brilliant game in the replay as well. So, but I think to play one off the other is not really justifying the two guys and their performances. You know, because what I like about Mick Fitzsimons is his recovery. You know, you see someone maybe get out or win a ball ahead of him, and he's back and he's getting a tackle in, and that to me is a really good defender. And also, he's reading the danger, so he's happy enough maybe to let his man score, you know, tap over a score because he's minding the house and sees the bigger picture. And I think that's a skill. It's very hard to. It's nearly like a sixth sense, really. You know, he can read the danger. You know, this is the lesser of all evils here now, and I know it's my man, and it maybe won't show up well when we meet for a team meeting. But I can see the bigger picture here, and I think that's why I'm like you, Marc. I think he's a dead cert.
Okay.
Goes about his business very, you know, calmly with the wee thing.
Yeah.
Really, very calm on the ball, and you know, very dependable. And there's no massive dash out and losing the ball, but he's you know, you back
can
him
be
all the
quietly
time.
brilliant. Yeah. If Fitzsimons is a unanimous choice for one cornerback, is Tom O'Sullivan the other?
I think so. Yeah.
You'd have to go Tom Sullivan as the Killarney vice is.
His stats in terms of players he marked throughout the year was absolutely incredible. I think up until the All-Ireland final. No, I think up until the All-Ireland final.
Yeah. I think he conceded 1 point from play up to the All-Ireland final, which is crazy stuff. Like.
And the thing about him is, if you see him in County Championship footballer, he's a footballer. He doesn't want to be in the full back line. He wants to be out in the half back line where he can express himself. And you know,
he got a goal in the Munster final.
Exactly,
exactly
and
that.
You know, I've seen him play games where he's kicking 3 or 4 points from the half back line. He's a player who likes to get up the field. But this year he was asked a different role. It was a needy area this year to carry full back line. Peter Crowley was brought from the half back line into full back. He tore his cruciate ligament. All of a sudden, Tyg Morley is drafted into the full back line. And you have a very young full back line in Kerry. You had Tom O'Sullivan in one corner, Jason Foley in the other corner, and you had Tyg Morley full back, and they all acquitted themselves very well. And I think, you know, even Tyke Morley had a very solid season. I thought he was outstanding.
Really,
but
really solid.
you know, he brings that bit of, you know, that we're talking about Mick Fitzsimons. He's really solid. There isn't going to be a mistake. You know, any ball that Paul Mannion won in the final, he really worked hard for it. But definitely, if we're talking about the corners, I think that Tom is deserved of his spot.
Yeah, they never had good cornerbacks, don't Kerry?
No, they were still.
Well, man, look at the score.
So they must be delighted for once.
They could halfbacks, but that's why we had to go to the full back line.
Couldn't get on in the half-back line. But his pace, I think, is the other huge aspect. I mean, he's really pacey.
Yeah, very fast.
And today, in today's game, no more than yourself when you were there, like the pace is so you need it. It's detrimental if you don't have pace there, because you will a small fraction you're beaten, you're gone. You have a Mannion coming at you.
Particularly in the full back line.
Yeah,
You know,
like you're trying to mark the Paul Mannions and
Absolutely.
Conor Gallans, the
yeah.
pace that they have.
And all that they need is enough room to swing the leg.
Yeah.
That's all. There's an instinct in them. They just need enough to step. And Mannion's very good at it. He just steps back. You know he's going to come onto the left foot every time. But all he needs is that yard, and next thing it's over the bar. So you've got to be lightning sharp in the full back line.
As a fullback, then, I like just looking here. There's a lot of kind of halfbacks in there. Stephen McMenamin had kind of a brilliant, almost breakout year for Donegal. Although I think Ronan McNamee, it seems anyway, would be in pole position for that, unless you guys think differently.
I suppose it's also that where we're going to fit in Tyrone, or where are the guys who picked the team going to fit in the Tyrone players in the 15. McNamee had been really solid for Tyrone at full back. Tyke Morley had been very good as well. It would be a close call with him. But you would have to say that Tyrone's, you know, they've had a tremendous campaign as well, and he's been really solid. Now it does help a defender in Tyrone. I don't mean this to be taken away from any defender there, but they do play quite a defensive setup, and you know, always have Colin Kavanagh back there, so you have an extra full back with you. So it does help, but they do break really at pace, but and any of them can break. But it's a slightly different system than most teams play.
Yeah, I just think he's a ball player, and he's been the mainstay for the Tyrone full back line over the last few years, and plus he's able to get up the field, you know, and he's their go-to man whenever there's a dangerous forward to come in. He's the stop guard, and I just think that, you know, this year in all the games he was prominent in all the games, and it's, you know, it's no surprise Tyrone got to the semi-final with a fella like him in the full back line.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
no, there are other players, obviously, you know, but I think the fact that Tyrone got so far, you know, he deserves it, I think.
Yeah, look, it's hard to argue with that, and you say, as we mentioned at the starters, you can justify anybody, and I'm going to throw in maybe something different. I know he started his career in the full back line as a really tight, and I know I played on him a couple of times, and you know, really tough cornerback. Probably was most prominent in the half back line for me this year was Donald Mchugh, and I thought he did a fantastic year. And I'm not sure when we get to the half back line we've a place for Donald Mchugh, and I suppose it'd be, I suppose, not to get a mention. To me, you know, I think he's young enough. Mead seemed to be looking to build on last year. Andy McEntee's done a really good job, and I would say he's the first. He's joint captain, I think, of the team. You know, he's a real leader in there, and you know him, and you could make justification for Conor McGill as well, who had a fantastic year as well. But again, you know, you're looking at maybe what's going to be picked as opposed to the fairest way to pick them. So, but I certainly think, you know, if a team is picked with either of them, for me, Donald Mchugh, to be honest, wouldn't be totally out of the way.
Keoghan did make the Balls.ie rolling All-Stars team at the end of the year, so he's definitely, I hope he's in with a shout anyway, but I think it's 2 votes to 1 for Ronan McNamee there.
Yeah, and he, if you go back to a lot of in those games, you know, his attacking play, Donald Mchughn's attacking play, he said he was at the end of so many moves. The last pass, you know, I'm not even sure of the game, but one of them he ended up taking a pass, giving it, taking it again, and putting it across the square to someone to tap into the net.
I think that was the Clare game.
The Clare game, I think you're right. You know, which shows a bit of innovation.
Absolutely.
You know, and as I say, when things are tight, that's when you're looking for leaders to just maybe go off script a bit and take
They
the
were in
challenge
trouble
to
at that
teams.
point in that game.
Yeah, they were.
And they
Yeah.
needed someone with that bit of spark.
Yeah,
Johnny,
and just to take a chance. And you know, football is all about taking chances.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we get a bit methodical at times, but you still want to, you know, a team without any flair or someone with a bit of innovation is a team in trouble, really. And he shows it. And for me, he had a fantastic game. But again, look, either him or Conor McGill on the All-Star team is not going to cause too much outrage, I wouldn't think.
For sure, yeah. You were mentioning there might not be room in the half-back line. That's because there's a lot of good players here that we're looking at the moment. You know, even jumping out of me years, like Ryan Mchugh is like, he was like a dead cert at one stage of the year, and then, you know, like Donegal are gone a while and you almost forget it, and you look at the team and you go, Jesus, is there even room for him? You know, there's a lot of players like that, isn't there, Johnny?
Yeah, there is. I mean, you know, you're looking at as you rightly point out, Donegal at one stage were really in a strong, probably finished the year on a little bit of a low for them, and maybe I thought at one stage we were going to be real contenders, and just didn't pan out that way. But certainly he was himself and Michael Murphy, you know, Paddy McBurdy's getting back to himself, but then, you know, he's the real dynamo on that team. He's up and he just I think you know, he's an unbelievable engine. Just seems to go forever, and his kick passing is so crisp. When he gives the ball, he's gone again to look for the return. He sets up an awful lot for them.
His display against Kerry, and we know how close Kerry got to winning on the All-Ireland, and Donegal could have, maybe should have beaten them that day in the Super 8s. Yeah. But that display was, you could argue, was in the top 3 or 4 displays of the whole year.
But Anthony, I think the ultimate compliment you can give to the likes of the Ryan McHughs, to the Jack McCaffreys, is if a team is going out playing them, they're actually putting a defender on them. Yeah. You know, you look at Kerry, Gavin White went on Ryan McHugh. You look at Jack McCaffrey, Durkin went on him. So like it is the ultimate compliment to give a defender, the fact that they have to put a defender on him. He's so influential, so dangerous. Ryan McHugh was outstanding all year. I suppose the one thing, when we mentioned Paddy Durkin did a job on him, and he was outstanding that night.
And Castlebar,
so much so, and he was outstanding all year, and so much so that I think he has to get a spot in the halfback line. You know, he was that good, and you know, the physicality he brings to the game, and he's able to match it up. He can get up the field, he can score a point, he can get back, he can defend. He has it all. He's a great defender.
I'd say up to that match, Ryan McHugh was a certainty to be wing back in the
Paddy Durkin almost marked him out of the spot.
And took the All-Star on him as well.
And he did it on McCaffrey as well. So if you're going to do it on McHugh and McCaffrey, you're like, you can't really argue with his position on the team. Is obviously we don't even need to talk. We'll talk about Jack McCaffrey later on when we're talking about the Player of the Year. But he's a guaranteed number 7. Who's the number 6 or number 5, whatever? Who's the number 6 then on the team? Marc.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, you look at the way the selection committee have put the team together, and you see James McCarthy in the backs. Now, he played in the replay in the middle of the field. You can, you know, you could make a play for everyone. You could make a play for Paul Murphy. You could make a play for Colin Boyle. But for me, James McCarthy, you know, he's just the go-to player for Dublin. Just solid. Every game he plays is solid. He's one of the unsung heroes for me in the Dublin team. Maybe you know, I'm not within the camp. I think he's such an influential driving force in this Dublin team, year in, year out. You know, he's around that middle area. I think it was actually one of the, if you could say Jim Gavin made a mistake, it was putting him in on Tommy Walsh in the drawn match, because it took away from that dominance that Dublin usually have in that middle 8, that, you know, where they have such big men around the place, the likes of Fenton, McCauley, Howard, and McCarthy's one of those fellas. So,
but on the other side, it shows the faith that Jim Gavin has in him, that he could take him, you know, and put him to do a job. And I think that's the ultimate compliment, you know, to any player that would put out a fire in any, like, you know, Tommy Walsh was going to come. I know Tommy Walsh did very well, don't get me wrong, but it shows what they think of James McCarthy in that setup, that, you know, we can take him from the midfield to put him in centre back, to then put him into full back, and still have the faith that he's going to do a job. I think
he's the guy you trust.
Absolutely.
But you could play him anywhere. You could play him anywhere from 2 to 9. You know, he's such a good footballer.
You get a lot of defenders who can only play in one position, but he can play midfield. He could even play as a wing forward if they ever wanted to go defensive. Centre back, probably his best position, and wing back.
And what he does as well, and it's only I try to catch him a few times. He's unbelievable. He never looks like he's flying, but he just glides, and he covers some ground. You know, he's very hard when he goes. He's such a big man. He's very hard to stop, you know. And
you're slowing down there, John.
Well, that's very true too.
I've heard of his times for the 400-metre runs are phenomenal. Like he just can keep going and going and going.
So as we move on to midfield, there's 6 nominations here. Brian Fenton, Michael Darragh-Macaulay, David Moore and Aidan O'Shea, Charlie O'Burns from Armagh and Brian Menton from Meath who are getting nominations there. I think you look at each one of them individually, you'd all say fair enough, but again, kind of you're always looking at who's there. There's definitely a lot of talk in Clare about Gary Brennan missing out, and I'm sure in every county there's probably somebody. But it's funny, Anthony, like we could talk about how great Charlie O'Burns is and how good he's coming through, that Brian Menton had a great year for Meath, but there's kind of no real discussion about the midfield this year, is there? It's Fenton and Moran.
Yeah, I mean, Moran really had a tremendous year, and it was great to see. Okay, obviously the opposition don't like to see you guys going well, but I mean, he had such promise. I think it was so good to see. Eventually, his talent really in Ireland final day and the replay, because he was such a talented underage coming through. Okay, had been away then for a number of years and came back, and probably apart from the move at the start of the second half, where you could have questioned, could he have, should he have sat back maybe in a knock on for the throw in, but he's been tremendous and such a leader. Maybe worrying thing for Kerry, maybe his mileage is going up as well, and they'll want him to be at the top of his game next year. Maybe I thought that maybe the last 10 or 15 minutes of the replay that, just the amount of running that the game's provided, and you have to do now at midfield, he tired slightly.
And I would have thought, particularly in the replayed game, I would have felt that he lost possession. He was driving forward the whole time, but he didn't seem to have. I know the other lads tired. You're talking about tired. He was the one driving forward. He got caught a couple of times in possession, but he didn't seem to have many options around him either. And he was the one leading the attack, and in lots of occasions.
He sets up so many attacks for them, in that he's the guy pulling the strings
his pass
and I know, Marc, you'll be more au fait with it, but he has his fair share of injuries as well.
He went 2 cruciates.
To come back from 1 cruciate is remarkable. To do 2 and to be still at the top of your game, and we talking about for another All-Star, it's a huge credit to him.
And the standout moment for me was, Kerry played Mayo in the last round of the National League and Tralee lost. Played Mayo in the National League final, lost, and the general consensus was that Kerry were bullied from Mayo, and the Super 8s in Killarney, and just before the ball is thrown in, and Aidan O'Shea is kind of throwing fellas around the place, and David Moran stood up to him, and he said, listen, this is the way it's going today. And the game he played that day in Killarney, it was in the heat, it was an outstanding performance, and he's got on, and he brought that consistency all year long, you definitely, I suppose, the replay, when he probably thought some fella was going to crash into him and they break down the ball, but the drawn match, the replay, he was the real go-to man for Kerry, and he's fully deserving of his All-Star. And it is great to see him back, where he's come from, to do the cruciate, to come back, to do the cruciate again, to get an eye injury. He could have packed it, but he's... And
you couldn't have blamed him back, because it's a long, lonely road when you're in there. And, outside our mind, you're there on your own, hours in the gym and whatever, So mentally very, very tough. And his performances this year were second to none. And even, we'll talk a bit about Brian Fenton, and it was all talk of he was having a fantastic year. And there was a lot, now you can credit Jack Barry a little bit as well, but, David Moran came in, he set the tone for a lot of those tough battles around the middle. He was showed it was men against boys at times. He just put his body on the line time and time again. For me, it's
so good to see him at that level this year, because he always had that talent. I remember reading an article about him during the year, and he said that he had such regret of losing a county under 14 championship in Kerry way back, and it was just he was putting that as sort of for a man that has won so much to say, like, that's what really counted, and I still feel a regret we lost that match. And I was saying, wow.
Brian Fenton, quickly, he actually was very quiet in the first game, slightly quiet by his standards, I suppose, in the replay as well. Kerry definitely did a number, but I suppose that frees up everybody around him, because so much has to go into holding a player like him back. But up until the final, his form, Johnny, was he was sauntering towards a footballer of the year. He was just dominating games.
And I think you made the point there, we're judging him on his standards, which are massive. He's gone now, I'm not sure how many games, but he's never lost a championship game in a Dublin jersey, which is it's phenomenal stuff. And he's such a powerful player. He's deceiving because he's obviously a massive big man, but the fact that he doesn't look to be that broad, but he's a bigger man when you stand beside him, and he just covers ground. His finishing is very good. He's great hands, great tackler. He's that that box to box player that you want. He's just such an engine in the middle of the field. There's lots of talk coming into the game about who was going to play in the middle of the field for Kerry, and there was talk that Jack Barry has played him on him in the past, and in fairness to Jack Barry, I thought he had 2 brilliant games. But again, Fenton, was awesome all through the year, and for me, he's a nail on All-Star.
And Johnny, I think Johnny hit the nail in the head there. We're judging him by his standards.
Yeah.
I remember the Gooch, there was one year there where by his own standards, only very fair, but he was still outstanding. And if you look back at the replay in particular, and if you watch Fenton, he still had a big influence in the game. He was still those pop passes from midfield into the half forward line. He was still tracking back. He worked so hard off the ball. Phenomenal player, and to think, as Johnny said, never lost a championship game. It's an unbelievable record, really.
And the thing is, I suppose you fall into the trap as supporters of looking, and the boys will know, I suppose, being in the dressing room, particularly you, Anthony, that's managing, you're watching everything. We judge him when he rattles the back of the net or kicks a massive score, but it's all them other things that make him great. It's all those tracking, it's that little pass out of trouble, it's enough to just knock the ball into the path of someone else. It's all those little things that make him great. It's not the icing on the cake is the score or the run through and berries in the back of the net. But for you that's going to build a team around someone solid, you have to get your midfield right. And he epitomises everything that's good about Dublin for me.
Not only his football, but his athletic ability, his GPS stats, his speed per metre is the highest, I would say, that's playing in the middle third of any of the players in the country by a mile. He is a long way ahead in his athletic ability of most players, and he just is not lazy. He's up and down, he's tracking. That aided with his fielding ability, his kicking ability. He scored very early on in the championships, as you said, Mick. He was sauntering through defences.
Exactly, yeah. We'll move on to the forwards. We've been all very polite and agreeing now. I think it's only Donald Mchugh made a debate even there of the first part of the show. But on to the forwards then. There's a lot of selection here. I'm just looking through the names, Marc, and it's like...
I'm just looking there now, and realistically, you could make a case for 11 players.
Yeah.
You could make a case for Kieran Kilkenny, Brian Howard, Paul Mannion, Dean Rock, Con O'Callaghan, David Clifford, Paul Ganey, who was outstanding in the finals, Sean O'Shea, Stephen O'Brien, Jamie Brent, Michael Murphy, Colin McShane. Where'd you stop? Connor Cox. You could make a case for every one of them.
Forward was brilliant for Cork all the way through.
And it's great to see Jamie Malone getting a nomination as well.
Definitely.
But like forwards this year, if you look at Dublin's defence, it was like you see and how solid they've been the last few years, and you see teams coming up against them and scoring against them. And I think it's reflective of the way the game is going too, particularly the finals. The two teams are going for it, and I think if you go for it, that creates space at the back, and it's a lonely spot to play in the full back line when the ball is just coming at you 100 miles an hour every few minutes. But I suppose half forward line, and I think it was Johnny that was talking before the show. It's amazing the way you come into an All-Ireland final and you have a player, selected for an All-Star, and then particularly with two All-Ireland finals, because there was a draw and a replay. 2 extra games, and I think that does change the dimensions a small bit. And you know,
Yeah.
I don't know where we're going to start.
You have to remind you have to go back to Kerry now, so you have to be careful.
Right. I think that Sean O'Shea has to be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You know,
undoubtedly. He's ahead, for me, he's ahead of David Clifford, and David Clifford had a tremendous year. For me, David Clifford should be there as well. And Paul Guinea very close. Stephen O'Brien, what a year
they all
he
have
had.
to be there.
Yeah. So Marc, you can say them all, but above any of them, Sean O'Shea, his play this year, he's unmarkable really. He's a nightmare. Like he's from one wing to the next, he's from one sideline to the next, he's from midfield, he's back in the backs. He's just, but his runs and his intelligence. Before a ball is played to him, he has already made 2 or 3 runs, so he knows he's getting it on the third one. Like his ability to get spaces.
I'd agree with you, Anthony. And the thing about Sean O'Shea is, you know, the start of the year, watching him playing Sigerson with UCC, the performance he was given. He started with Kerry in the National League. He was getting Player of the Week, Player of the Week, Player of the Week. Goes on with Kerry, didn't miss any shot in the final, in the drawn. In the replay, I think he kicked 15 points in 2 All-Ireland in 2 games. It's a phenomenal record, and you know, for us this year, the big talk was, you know, when you lose players like the Gooch, when you lose players like Declan O'Sullivan, you're never going to replace those players. But when you have the likes of Sean O'Shea coming and the likes of Clifford coming, all of a sudden people are talking about those players with the same enthusiasm, with the same. You know, that we were talking about Gooch and Sullivan. So
they're the main reason why Kerry will be favourites to win the All-Ireland next year.
you said that, Anthony. We're trying to talk down Roscoe now.
But for me, with O'Shea was, and Marc rightly pointed out, you know, it's what an All-Star should be.
Yeah.
You know, in the muck and slop of the winter, it didn't matter where, didn't matter what jersey he had on his back, he was the go-to man.
Yeah.
You know, and someone, is he 21 yet? Maybe just about.
2021,
you know, and to see his performance on his place kicking alone in the biggest stage under the biggest pressure. I mean, you know, you see guys in the Rugby World Cup and you know, they talk about from non-stop the kickers. Like, it's a massive, massive part of the game.
Yeah.
Like, it's the difference between winning and losing, you know. And the percentage him and in fairness to Dean Rock is up there, you know, they're the small little margins, and you know, Anthony.
This guy has it though. He has
does.
more than
I
just being a
agree.
really brilliant place kicker.
I suppose my point,
my
point being, for such a young lad to show that
Leadership,
and
forward, and
the mentality of it, like you know, kicking into the hill, you know, in the biggest day at 21 years of age, and it never took. He might have been out in the back garden, never phased him. So you know, to me, he's the ultimate All-Star from start of the year to the end. You know.
Who's outside him then? This is the kind of hard part you're probably looking at. Brian Howard, Stephen O'Brien had like a brilliant year for him. Like, you know, someone that's been around a while, but kind of it was almost a breakthrough year in a way. Like, you know, there's loads of others as well.
For me, I think Stephen O'Brien should be under 15. You might be knocking out. You might be knocking out someone like Michael Murphy now, but he carried the fight for Kerry right through. I mean, in all the matches, might have been disappointed with. You know, he had a super chance to maybe to lay on a goal versus going for that shot with a tight angle against Cluxton. But he just never stopped, and he shows what you really want in a forward. He's just so mad to take on his man, to turn his defender, to get inside him, short his route to goal. He has all the attributes that you'd want from a flyer of a wing forward.
Yeah.
He promised this for years, but I suppose this year was his ultimate year for me.
No, he was outstanding, and I'd have to agree with that. Like, I think Dublin targeted him in the drawn game. They put John Small on him. It was a great battle. It's so different to Kerry targeting Jack McCaffrey. You know, you do target the main players, and he was outstanding all year, and hard to argue with that.
Okay. So
I won't argue with any of that, but I still don't think he's going to make it. Unfortunately for him, I think the 2 All-Ireland finals probably are going to go against him, even though
possibly.
You know, to me, Brian Howard deserves a really big mention here, and he's in with a really good shout. You know, again, you know, got some crucial scores for Dublin. You know, some of his ball winning ability when Kerry were dominating kick outs for you know, pushing a high press. Cluxton was able to find him.
Well, he made the goal.
He made the goal for McCaffrey. You know, fantastic fielding.
If you do the stats on the Dublin players, he's probably the best this year for a winning kick-out.
Yeah, and you do have to miss that part of the game, of a team's game. You know, I often heard McGeaney talking about, you know, it was up to from 1 to 12 were to make 13, 14, 15 look like all-stars.
Yeah.
And if they weren't doing their job, well, we're going to struggle. And to me, he's a really good team player, you know, and he deserves a strong mention.
But even at that, Johnny, all you have to do is go back and look at the last 10 minutes of the drawn match, and he came back. I don't know, was he told to come back or was he? But he positioned himself in the Dublin full half-back line. He was getting on ball. There was 2 or 3 Kerry fellas coming at him. He had the composure for a big man to be able to side evade them, get past them. You know, the physicality of him, the way Johnny says, the way he can catch a ball, the ball skills that he has. He's just an incredible footballer who I think is probably going to go out midfield, 2 Raheny men out in the middle of the field for Dublin. It's hard to argue with that. I
think he's only getting better.
And Johnny mentioned it about Sean O'Shea. It's about consistency over the course of the year. And if you are going with that, Brian Howard deserves an All-Star.
So if Brian Howard's on one wing and we're arguing for Stephen O'Brien on the other, who would you have as the other wing if you don't think O'Brien
I'd say we're not finished arguing either. Like there's a big. Obviously, Michael Murphy played a lot of his football in the middle of the field, and he's been nominated in the forward. So reading between the lines, are they moving him back in there to justify? And not that you have to justify, but he's certainly in a strong position. Again, you know, you're not going to pick a team without Kieran Kilkenny. Is he going to be in the half-forward line? So it's going to be very, very difficult.
Well, so again, get the man of the match in the replay.
Yeah.
You know, and I am of the opinion that good players don't play bad twice. And and it's something that I used to always do throughout my career. If I was marking a player, I'd see how he played in the previous game. And if he played poorly, I'd be really
double alert.
Double alert.
And he was playing well, you put Mahoney over on him.
But but he was. I knew there was going to be a kick in him in the replay, and by God did we see it.
So we'll nail down. We're getting into the 6 forwards. We'll nail down 10, 11, and 12 here. We're all agreed. Thankfully, we've one agreement that Sean O'Shea is at number 11. There's a lot of talk about Brian Howard, there's a lot of talk about Kieran Kilkenny, there's a lot of talk about Michael Murphy, and there's a lot of talk about Stephen O'Brien, but we can only fit 2 of them. Can we get a consensus?
I doubt it. For me, it's Stephen O'Brien and Kieran Kilkenny.
For me, it's Stephen O'Brien.
Okay.
Stephen O'Brien 10, Sean O'Shea 11.
And Kieran Kilkenny 12 for me. That would be my half-forward line.
Look, Murphy was outstanding, and you know, phenomenal year.
Well, I think he should have been listed at midfield for.
Yeah, I think so.
The other side of it is we'll probably have to pick what we think, not what we think is going to be picked as well.
Yeah.
So we're getting a bit skewed by that.
Yeah.
So for me, you're going to end up with 3 Dublin and 3 Kerry, and in your forward. And for me, if that's going to be the case, it's going to be your half forward of Kieran Kilkenny, Sean O'Shea, and
Stephen
O'Brien.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
We'll go with Kilkenny
go
over
with
Howard.
The fact that the 2 Kerry boys in there.
Can we note that
I would have Howard before.
Can we note that you didn't propose it, like just to ruin you when you go back on the road?
No, I did. Stephen O'Brien is outstanding.
Can we play right forward in this team?
We've done all this though and said that Michael Murphy isn't on the half-forward line.
I'm
Best player in Ireland for the last overall the last 10 years.
I'm going to try Michael Murphy's name back in again here now, just to give him another chance, because it's full forward line now. And Conor Callaghan, Paul Mannion, David Clifford, Dean Rock, Paul Gainey. Oh my God, Michael Murphy.
Colin McShane
is probably the next. Like you know, and look, it's not to be disrespectful to Conor Cox or Brian Hurley or to Paddy McBrearty or anything like that, but in the year that's in it, it's those names really. Like McShane was brilliant, but we can only pick 3. I think we're all agreed that Conor Callaghan, and we'll talk more about him when we get to the player of the year, but Conor Callaghan has to go in, given his last 3 matches. And David Clifford?
For me, Clifford has to be there. I think that the drawn match even, and then, you know, his consistency throughout the year. But let's just look at the drawn match. Let's look at the pressure that he put on Johnny Cooper. And, you know, for all Kerry's dominance in the middle of the field in the first half, there was 3 balls that went into him. He won 2 frees, he won a penalty. He was creating havoc inside there. And they had to change their game plan. They had to put Mick Fitzsimons back, who I'd imagine would have been the plan for Tommy Walsh when he came in. So that meant then that James McCarthy was coming back as well. So, and then, you know, by his own standards, he was normal game with 2 points. Then the replay to kick 4 points from play. And any time he got the ball, he just looked so dangerous. And for a young player to be so young, to be able to demand the ball, to be able to be so creative, off left, off right, I think he's just once in a lifetime footballer that you know comes along.
Like, again, for me, what defines a great player is that they never stop. And regardless of what's going right or what's going wrong, they just never stop. They're relentless. Like, you know, the first day out in the All-Ireland, like, you know, Clifford kicked 2 or 3 ones that you bank on him, you know, every day. But still had a massive influence, still chipped in with a couple of scores, was causing Dublin defence, you know, loads of trouble. And then to turn around and put on the performance he put on the second day, you know, albeit again on a losing team, but never stopped. And for me, again, with David Clifford, like, David Clifford was a superstar before he ever kicked the ball at senior level. Yeah. What he'd done at underage, and that is anyone that's come through an underage system, the step to senior inter-county at the highest level is massive. And people don't really realise. They think, you know, for someone that doesn't understand, are not involved in teams, and they say, oh, he was a great minor. And there's a reason why a lot of great minors don't make it. There's a lifestyle, and there's, you know, maybe they were strong, physically very strong at underage, and, you know, people catch up and all that sort of thing. But he just moved through as if he's still playing minor. And to me, that's why he's a great player, and to me, that's why he's an all-star, without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, he's just, if you say, well, I'm going to be marking David Clifford, and I'm looking at the video and looking at all these matches, he's doing something different every day. Yeah. And so I know that he's going to, you know, dummy to the left and go to his right, and, you know, kick off his left. He'll do the opposite the next day. So everything I was expecting, you know, he's just a nightmare for any defender who'll try and do close analysis of him. And that's what you're saying. Like, I totally agree. Yeah. He's just remarkable, really. One of those guys.
The drawn match for me, Anthony, where under the hill, Cusick side, when he got the ball, and Fitzsimons was doing everything right. Clifford turned right, he turned left, turned right, he turned left again. And over the bar, he got a point out of nothing, and
which is way out.
Yeah, and to be able to do that when there was nothing on, for me, and at such a young age, you know, he's a real leader, and, you know, looking forward to watching him years to come.
Absolutely. If I can take from what Johnny said earlier, and despite all the names we mentioned there who were all brilliant and had great years, between us here and trying to pick this last position, are we looking at a choice between Paul Mannion and Colin McShane? Am I missing out on someone?
Possibly that, yeah. But for me, it has to be Mannion.
Right.
And I just think he was outstanding all year. You could say, you know, the drawn match, missed a few chances, all right, in the replay as well. But just the consistency, he's just to be marking him. It would be every time he gets the ball, you know, he's taking you on. And for a defender, that's the ultimate nightmare. And to be able to kick right, left. I mentioned physicality again. I keep coming back to it. To have that in your locker, it's a massive thing. And for me, he has to be a shoe-in. Look, Colin McShane was outstanding. I'm not taking away. There was the first half there against Kerry where he caused absolute, mayhem. And a great footballer. And to see where he's come from, 2018, all of a sudden 2019, what the levels of improvement that he's brought to his game. You know, he was the reason that Tyrone were where they were.
Yeah, arguably Tyrone's best player of the year.
Yeah.
And he's not enough.
You guys, like, you know, we talked about that match earlier, you know, and 4 points between them. Like, he's the weapon now for Tyrone.
He's the go-to man. And was that day. When the game was in the melting pot, he was the go-to man. Really, really hard to mark. Physically, very, very strong. The reason why Tyrone, you know, got to the All-Ireland semi-final.
but Mannion is probably ahead on
Mannion,
all three scorecards.
Mannion then had his best year probably for Dublin ever this year. You'd have to say that.
Yeah.
And he's really come of age, and again, his pace. He's able to kick from a standing position as well.
Absolutely,
He'll pull back from a defender, and a defender will have him shepherded out. He'll
Probably
pull
the only
back.
player I've seen do that, you know, the way he can do that.
That skill is and his accuracy from a standing position that he's now pulled back and he just popped.
The team that we've kind of come to some sort of a consensus of, I don't think we'll ever agree on that half forward line if we're here for another few years, but is Cluxton, Fitzsimons, Ronan McNamee, Thomas Sullivan, Paddy Durkin, James McCarthy, Jack McCaffrey, Brian Fenton, David Moran, Kieran Kilkenny, Sean O'Shea and Stephen O'Brien, David Clifford, Conor Callaghan and Paul Mannion. It's not a bad team.
No, it's not too bad at all. No, it's not too bad at all.
It's not too bad.
Wouldn't like to knock on them.
We'll probably make sure that nobody in Donegal sees this video. So as the PwC GPA Footballer and Young Footballer of the Year, we'll get to the Footballer of the Year in a minute, but Young Footballer, we've talked about Sean O'Shea and David Clifford a lot. It's great to see Rian O'Neill in here as well. He's a future superstar in Armagh, I think, and he really came alive and put himself on the national scene this year. But in fairness, the two Kerry lads we're talking about, they're in our 15. They're the ones that are probably ahead at this stage. Is it Clifford or O'Shea? It's. I'm not going to ask Sophie's choice for Marc, but what about you, Johnny?
For me, I would give it to Sean O'Shea. I think, and maybe I'm a little bit biased as someone that kicked frees as well, but his performance all year, from start of the year to the finish, his kicking is unbelievable. For just such a young guy, as I said earlier, the pressure that he must have been under, but obviously, there's ice in the veins. Such a brilliant year for him, and he gets my nod.
And just to carry on from Johnny's point about it's great to see Armagh coming again, and Rian O'Neill and he mentioned Jarlath O'Burns. They're great players. For me, you know what, we look at the All-Ireland finals, we see how good Clifford and how good O'Shea was. I'd go along with Sean O'Shea as well. I think Clifford has had an outstanding year. He got it last year. But, we saw the great scores O'Shea kicked in the draw and the replay. Cast your mind back to the National League when he kicked that outrageous sideline kick against Tyrone in the National League, where, the fans were up in the stand. They just couldn't believe it. And to do it in such greasy conditions, winter underfoot conditions, would remind you of the kick that Maurice Fitzgerald kicked against Dublin and Thurles. And he has that ability. He has that kicking ability. And like Johnny said, ice in the veins, born to play football, and I'd be giving it to Sean O'Shea.
Yeah, absolutely, an unbelievable season for Sean O'Shea. We'll move on to the Footballer of the Year, lads, and 3 Dublin lads to pick from here. But if you look at Jack McCaffrey, we haven't talked about. We did talk about Cluxton. We haven't talked about Conor Callaghan. Jack McCaffrey was man of the match in All-Ireland semi-final and an All-Ireland final this year, and never mind what he did beforehand, where he was destroying teams on his own.
And again, to come from where he went last year, doing the cruciate, and to come back from that, what? It's as if he was never up.
Faster than ever.
Yeah, exactly, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's a case of point. Sometimes you lose a bit of pace when you do the cruciate, but he could have got faster.
Put in an extra hamstring.
I'd say so.
And the killer thing for when he scores, sorry for cutting across, when he scores, be it a goal or a point, he actually nearly runs faster going back the field, and you're thinking, oh my God.
And particularly for that goal, the first day he got, when you looked at it afterwards, he made a burst and run from inside his own 14, I think, and just headed off and took a chance and all of a sudden. And then the finish was, there's one thing going up there at that pace, you'd often maybe do, and your tongue would be out, you wouldn't be able to kick the ball for, the finish and everything, absolutely, and he's done that time and time again for Dublin.
I meant 2 All-Ireland finals in a row there, as opposed to the semi-final he wasn't. And Con then is this was a guy who everybody's so excited about anyway, and already kind of among the best players in the country, who just took that step forward again this year. And what he did against Mayo in particular, I think, just made everybody think this guy's on a new level completely again now, isn't he?
But that was my point about going at players. And I think poor old Lee Keegan will have nightmares looking at the reruns of that tape, because Con gets the ball and it's just route one. He just goes for it. And I think that the goals, that's the way they were. And the social media picture of him of Con before and Con now, and the we've all seen it in the physique, and I keep going back to the physicality, and they have it. And if you're a cornerback and you're marking this guy, and like what you have to do to beat him is basically to get to the ball before him, because if he gets the ball, the problems start, and he'll take you on. If he doesn't, he'll slip it, but more often than not. And then to do what he did, and then come out the following week and kick 2-3 in a hurling in a game, he's a freak of nature, and he's just thank God I'm retired anyway.
But the thing about him, and about all really good inside forward, he's like an instinct for goal. And you talk about particularly the second goal he scored against Mayo. He just seemed to step inside, drop the hip, and all of a sudden Lee Keegan was gone. Without him even playing the ball. He just, whatever way he jinked. And the Gooch had it as well. If you remember the All-Ireland final against Mayo, the ball he caught. Came in, and one bounce, and three defenders. It looked like he was going to pull the trigger. He just bounced, came into the left foot, and just passed it. And David Heaney went one side. He lost three defenders in one bounce. And you can't, you're talking about going into a coach, you can't coach that. You can show lads, but I think that's something that it's instinctive in you.
I agree with you.
And just, first thing on his mind, it was interesting to hear him after the All-Ireland. He was interviewed, and his mantra, his mindset was that, oh well, sure, you have to go for goal, and if the worst thing happens, you probably end up getting a pint. Like, how many people think that way? And that's for me why he's a bit special.
It's what you want from an inside forward, as you said. You want him to take on the ball, but he'll always take the right option, and he'll go at it different ways at different times. But he wants his balance. Yeah, his balance is he's never put off balance. He had a fetch in the Super Race match against Roscommon that he almost put his leg into full 360. His athleticism that he's brought to this year, but he will always go for the juggler, go for the goal.
He was arguably Dublin's best forward in, I think, almost maybe all but one of their games this year in a team that won the All-Ireland. Where does that leave us then? Because we talked about Cluxton earlier, probably having his best year and being the kind of heartbeat of everything that Dublin do well. McCaffrey, I think McCaffrey's probably third on this list, is he?
He is for me.
He is for me as well.
For me, in an era that I remember growing up, and the father had the Kerry Golden years, and at the end of the Kerry Golden years video, which I watched time and time again, was Mchugh Dwyer came on, and he said, he credited the team. They were talking about going for 5 in a row. He says they've achieved something another team will never achieve. To me, this Dublin team, that era they've won 8 All-Ireland medals. Maybe Dublin won't do that, but they've done what that Kerry team, and that's no disrespect to the Kerry team, but they've won 5 in a row. And the constant all the time in that, and the catalyst for that, for me, was Stephen Cluxton. I'm not sure, I'm not trying to write him off, and he looked like a lad that celebrated that a little bit differently. Okay, it was 5 in a row.
Let's hope so.
For the rest of the country, let's hope. It would be a huge travesty if he retires and doesn't have Footballer of the Year beside his name. And maybe that's sentimental on my behalf. I would have said the same, looking down to the Roll of Honour, that there's no Colin Cooper as Footballer of the Year. To me, was one of the greatest of his era. So for me, and I know Footballer of the Year should be just that window of the year. He had a phenomenal year. Plus everything else that went with it. Captained the 5 in a row team. He's my Footballer of the Year.
I'd have to agree with that, because we were talking about Brian Fenton, we were talking about standards. Stephen Cluxton has standards, and we just take them as a given. His kickouts, the way they go according to plan, the way he sets up the Dublin attacks, the replay, the way there was a ball, I think 60 yards kicked out to the Hogan stand side to Kilkenny. These are just things that we take as normal. And we used to have video sessions on Stephen Cluxton. We'd spend 20 minutes trying to crack this fella, and what other player could you say that of, that you're spending 20 minutes to try and stop him? And you know what, there was days where, geez, we have this fella, and first half, and he'd go in at half time, he'd get himself right, and he was able to come out of an area where, and every player plays poorly in certain stages or does mistakes, but he'd come out and he'd correct those mistakes, and all of a sudden it was normal service resumed. And you know, when you get to an All-Ireland final, then you know you have your standards all the way through. Then you get to an All-Ireland final, and all of a sudden Kerry are putting it up to you, and you have to go up a notch. He went up 2 or 3 notches. You know, he was kicking balls out, he was blocking balls. We mentioned the saves. What he brought to Dublin this year is nothing short of phenomenal, and I'd have to agree with Johnny.
And I think there was a story a few years ago about him when Dublin were after winning the All-Ireland. It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I think Anthony Tuchel was captain of or was manager of the Compromise Rules team, and they were training. They were training in Dublin on a Saturday morning. Some of the Dublin lads had to go. Said to Anthony, "We have to go. We're getting a team photo taken this morning. They had to be wherever they were to be." And they all headed off, and no sign of Stephen Cluxton moving. And Anthony said to him, "Do you want to go?" I said, "No, I'm here to train. Nothing gets in the way of my training, and they'll wait for me." And he kept them waiting an hour. He said they weren't going to take the picture without me. And so that'll tell you the mindset of someone like that. So it's not by chance he's the best at his game. You know.
Yeah, he's the best. He's not just the captain. Things we don't see, what goes on behind closed doors, and there is no doubt he's the best guy in the dressing room as a player. And if you're talking about players leading recovery as they did after the first day, if they're down at half time, Cluxton is the go-to man. Yeah. He's the best at rallying his troops, and when he speaks, you know, it's something similar to your story. That's it every day and every night with Cluxton. And if somebody's a fraction off, he will tell them. And to have that leader and that respect, and he has put himself there. So I suppose it's fitting in a way after winning, being the first team to win 5 in a row, and that their captain hasn't got player of the year before this, should get it this year. For me, that's why he should get it. There's also a point that Marc said, he was slightly nerved, or maybe not. The team, Kerry, were going to really go at him by pushing up the first day, until the Howard kick out, until he pinged that ball inch perfect to Howard, popped it to McCaffrey, normal service resumed. Then you have the two saving the penalty. Okay, you can argue that Paul could have put it lower to the corner, but it was a crucial save. Kerry were flying at that stage, had to score that penalty, and he saved from O'Shea in the second half. I mean, he did keep Dublin in it.
No doubt.
And by saves and by his kickouts.
For me, not only footballer of the year, but one of the most influential players of all time.
For sure. Yeah, for sure.
The biggest thing for me as well is his modesty and the way he conducts himself. And that's an example to any player. I think the majority of the GA players have that modesty and how they carry themselves. And all these 45 players.
Absolutely.
There's one, even Brian Fenton, when the word was that Brian Fenton would go to all the Dublin hurling matches over the last 5 years, because he said that they deserved to get the same support as the footballers. That's what he taught. So the mentality of these players, for all the 45 players that are here, they're to be admired.
But that's why they are all-stars. And that goes across any sport. And we live in an era now, we hear about the All Blacks and, their mentality and the no gobshite rule and all that sort of thing. They don't do. But these, into top teams, these guys that don't come up to that level, they don't survive. They're weeded out. And there was one clip after the All-Ireland final, as there normally is. I think it was Cormac Costello, the music was going in the dressing room and there was a bit of dancing. Yeah. After winning 5 in a row, he was well entitled to do it. But just on the corner of the camera, here's Stephen Cluxton with the brush sweeping the dressing room. So you go in and there's some really good lads, and they were in my dressing rooms. I'm sure they were in the lads as well. They were great to talk, but actions were way off before the talking was done. Yeah. All these guys, and I'm sure if you go back to clubs, they'll give you the examples. They're as big a club men as they are county men. And they just, I suppose, they're lucky enough, and they talk about representing the club and what it means to the people that gave them that opportunity, and that's the big thing about it. And sometimes we can get, when kids look at the telly and we talk about this natural thing, and of course there's a bit of flair and there's it comes easier to some people, but it's their mindset, it's their mentality that sets all of these lads apart. They are all stars for that reason, for me.
Absolutely, and that's the perfect way to leave it. I think. Thanks a million To Johnny Doyle, to Marc, and to Anthony Cunningham. You can download the PwC All-Stars app and pick your own All-Star football and hurling teams. You can also vote for the PwC GEA GPA Footballer, Young Footballer, Hurler and Young Hurler of the Year award. And there's lots more on there as well that's worth your time, including All-Stars news, archives and a weekly quiz that's been keeping us all occupied in the office all summer.